Hey guys, welcome back to another Jumpstart devlog, or should I say 1-bit survivor. So the game has a title now, and not only that, but the game is out. If you want to get it on Android, head over to the Google Play Store and download it for free right now. You can also play an experimental Windows build on itch.io. Check it out and let me know what you think. The links are in the description below. And with that, let's roll the trailer and get on with the rest of the video. So where we left off last time, I had mentioned that there was a faster way to save the game, and that was with caching. A cache is a memory that can be accessed significantly faster than direct file I/O, but it's also ephemeral, or essentially it doesn't exist until you write it to the hard drive. All I had to do was to change all of my saving statements to cache statements. So now the game saves all of the memory to a cache file. At some point you're going to have to save that cache to memory, so at convenient points in the game I do that. It's not going to cause stuttering because I only save when the player exits the game or they start a new day. Basically points in the game where stuttering isn't going to be noticeable. The next thing I wanted to work on was to fix the balancing of the upgrade system. Previous system, the player could choose between 4 upgrade options, which made playtesters end up picking the optimal choice every time. And also players end up getting choice paralysis, where having too many choices makes it feel meaningless. This design tends to go against the major hook of a roguelike, where the upgrades you are offered dynamically change your playstyle for the rest of the game. So to fix this, I needed to do 2 things. First, I needed to offer a bigger variety of upgrades. That way, no single upgrade becomes the default strategy. Here are some of the new upgrades I added to the game. I created a piercing upgrade so that players can shoot through walls and multiple enemies. I created a sawed-off upgrade, which adds extra damage at close range. Then I added the sledgehammer upgrade. You can break walls by shooting them with it. And then I added the medkit, which will instantly revive you if your HP reaches 0. There are more upgrades in the game, but I want you to find that out through gameplay. Now that I have a variety of upgrades to choose from, I now needed to make them more valuable. To do this, I designed the new upgrade system to only offer 2 choices to the player. This change will naturally enforce build variety because now your choice has more meaning. Additionally, upgrades that are offered to the player will not be offered a second time. This will make the player's choice have more weight. Following up on the previous devlog, I created 3 new special infected types. The first new enemy is called the Skelly. This enemy is a skeleton filled with bugs inside of it. Every time the Skelly takes damage, it will spawn a bug right next to it. This will encourage the player to kill the Skelly in one hit rather than use a knife. It's designed to punish players that conserve their ammo too much. The next enemy is called the Bloater. The Bloater is a Left 4 Dead boomer type enemy with low health. When it dies, it will explode and destroy any walls adjacent to it. For this enemy, I added a new ability to break walls of the maze. Using this ability, I also made that upgrade from earlier called the Sledgehammer. To make the sounds for this enemy, I would burp into the mic to make it sound extra gross and somewhat like a frog. The final enemy I added is called the Imp. This character is meant to be a demon and is smarter than the rest of the mobs in the game. I gave it a very far line of sight, and I also gave it the most health. To make it stand out besides having more health, I also gave it the ability to push the player back whenever it attacks you. Sometimes this can lead to an early game over for the player if the demons end up wombo comboing you. I recently watched the Sakurai devlog on pausing for impactful moments. This is also called hit stop, and I decided to implement this feature into 1-bit Survivor. Now whenever an actor dies, they will make a request to play slow motion for a small amount of time. Once I added this in, it made me realize how much the game needed more effects to make actions in the game more satisfying. I had already made blood effects, but they were unable to play multiple times. So once again, I created an object pooling system for blood particle effects, then used this new system for blood and guts. Now when multiple enemies die at the same time, there's even more blood and it lingers in the level for a longer amount of time. The next thing I did was add a common request among playtesters, the ability to run zombies over with the car. To create this effect, I turn on a box collider that triggers a function for enemies to instantly die. This is the end result. I also made sure to record the number of roadkills in the player statistics. Another cool effect I added was to make the game over statistics count up like a slot machine at the end of each run. Now getting a game over doesn't feel so bad since you get to see this cool effect. Since I'm not a good 2D artist, I decided to use Fiverr to contract someone to make the cover art for the game. I started by making a listing on Fiverr for a chibi/cartoon art style with as many details as I could for what I needed to be visible. I put an emphasis on having characters over a landscape so that I could reuse them later in screenshots. Luckily, an artist by the username Pentax25 specialized in making Paper Mario style characters, which would go very well with the sort of whimsical theme of the game. I worked back and forth with the artist with some sketches to decide on character poses and placement. And this is the final result. Then I had to make the font for the title. I got some references of a Mario style font, then drew it on a notebook by hand. Next I took pictures of my font and traced it in paint.net, and created the title art from these letters. Even though I told the artist to only use black and white, I ended up making the background monsters gray so that the hero character and the cat can stand out. Since I decided to delay the release of the game to December, I now had time to implement the new classes. The first new class is the Assault class. This character uses a shotgun and is effective at close range, but has low health and low ammo. Similar to the first character, I used my broken airsoft guns to make animations for the Assault. Then I made the character portrait animation and the sprites for the character animations. To unlock this class, the player has to beat the game once as the survivor. Next I worked on the Ranger class. This character was supposed to use a bolt action rifle, but I decided to use an old AK instead. If you're working on a game that has a lot of guns, I recommend buying a used or broken airsoft gun because they work very well for making sounds or animations for your game. Then I made a new weapon sprite for the UI, the character portrait, and the character animations. This character is effective at range, but also has low health and ammo similar to the Assault. Essentially, these two new classes are supposed to act like difficulty spikes and make the game harder if you were able to beat the original game. When playing as the Ranger, I found that the player was forced to buy the flashlight upgrade to use this class effectively, so I decided to give this class the flashlight by default so they don't waste an upgrade on buying it. Then I asked my girlfriend to voice lines for this character. And with that, the game now has 3 classes to play as. At this point, the game was feature complete. The remainder of the work is all about presentation, tutorials, and polish. The first thing I added to the main menu was the tutorial. I'm a pretty lazy game dev, and I really didn't want to make an active tutorial or a tutorial where the player learns the mechanics one at a time. Instead, I made a tutorial that simply shows screenshots with text explaining the mechanics of the game. I'm using scriptable objects here. During playtesting, I found that this tutorial wasn't quite good enough to prepare the player for the challenging gameplay. However, they can always come back to it and read it again to get more insights on how to play better. The next thing I needed to add was a storyline. In the original game design doc, the player's motivation for beating the game was to save their pet cat. I planned on doing something simple, such as showing a picture and reusing my typewriter script from before. However, I wanted to keep aligned with that theme that we are always looking through the main character's perspective. For example, the upgrade menu has the player looking at a notebook with their hands on it. With this theme in mind, I reused my hand art and placed them on a Polaroid picture. It's as if the main character is reminiscing about past events, and I can show the player the storyline. To make the cutscenes more dynamic, I added a lot of detailing animations to rotate the Polaroid into the camera view, as if the character is grabbing the Polaroid from off screen. Then I split the cutscene into 2 layers, where one layer acts as a backdrop of the photo, and a second layer shakes erratically to make it appear more dynamic. And finally, the last effect I added was an overall subtle move up and down, as if the main character was breathing heavily. And with that, the story and the motivation for the player has been set. I don't want to spoil anything, so I suggest you play the game to find out what the story is. After playtesting a lot, I found that I needed to offer more quality of life options for the player to tailor their experiences better. Since some phones only run at 60 Hz while others can go up to 120, I decided to let the player change their frame rate. That way, if the player wants to conserve battery or maximize the smoothness of the game, they can choose whichever frame rate best suits their needs. Next, I added the ability to change the camera mode from smooth to snapped. Sometimes the pixel perfect smooth camera can appear jittery, so I figured there might be a lot of players who prefer to have a snapped camera. I also had a request to remove the camera shake from the game, so I added that into the options as well. The next big task to tackle was integrating Google Play features into the game. The first thing I learned when approaching this problem was, before deciding to follow through on a project, start working on your store page integration first. Integrating Google Play services at the end of a project lifecycle was more difficult than if I integrated it from the very beginning. So don't make my mistake. If you plan on using Steamworks, iOS, or Play Store, start integrating it once you decide to go from prototype to full release. With that, the first feature I worked on was achievements. This one was pretty easy. First, I created a spreadsheet of achievement ideas for my game. The total point values for your achievements on Google Play can add up to 1,000 gamer score. Unfortunately, I used all 1,000 points on my first batch of achievements. In hindsight, I recommend not using all 1,000 if you plan to make more achievements in the future. Once you upload your achievements to Google Play, you can't change it. One technique I'm using with my achievements is to make them progress related. For example, my achievements track how many weeks the player has survived. With these achievements, it will allow me to see how far the average player makes it into the game. I also have an achievement to track players that don't read the tutorial. It's called TLDR, and you get it by reading the tutorial in less than 5 seconds. I created the achievement icons by repurposing some of my assets from the game, and then finally I had to integrate the achievements into the game. First, I made a singleton class with an enum for all the different achievements that can be unlocked. The intention behind making a separate class for achievements is that I can make it cross-platform in the future. I just make a call to unlock an achievement, and then the achievement master handles the request depending on what platform the game is on. For Google Play, you just make a call to social.reportProgress using the hash code of the achievement and set it to 1.0f or 100% unlocked. Keep in mind that for Google Play, once you unlock an achievement, you can never go back and test it again. And with that, the achievements have been implemented. The next thing I knew would make the game really fun was to add leaderboards. Similar to Resident Evil speedruns, I find it very interesting to see how fast players can beat the game. I started by making the leaderboards inside of Google Play Console, which includes the following leaderboards: fastest completion times, most enemies defeated, most knife kills, most rogue kills, least healing items used, and least shots fired. I'm really excited to see who will end up at the top of leaderboards and what kind of scores are possible. Hopefully there won't be any hacking. Similar to achievements, to report a score to the Google Play leaderboards, you just have to call social.reportscore. Finally, I added 2 new buttons to the main menu, which open the Google Play achievements and the leaderboards page. This one is also pretty easy. You just call social.showLeaderboardUI, and for achievements, you call social.showAchievementsUI. The last feature I wanted to implement was the ability to remove ads from the game. Adding the ability to remove them is more of a way to support me, the developer, and a quality of life improvement for the player. The game really doesn't have that many ads, but I figured I should add this for the people who want to support me. The first step to setting up the in-app purchase is to create the product in the Google Play console. Then I modified some code I found online for purchasing in-app products. Essentially, in-app purchases can have 4 possible outcomes, and it's up to you, the programmer, to handle them. The customer's purchase will process immediately, or the payment can be processed after a delay. The other 2 outcomes are when the card is declined, or it's declined after a delay. And finally, the player can just back out and refuse to purchase it. In my game, it checks whether or not you have purchased the ads every time it starts up, or anytime the player clicks the coffee button. Additionally, I added fraud protection by verifying that the player has a product receipt. I found out during playtesting that if you do not check the receipt, the player can refund the purchase and continue the game without ads. So if you're thinking about adding an in-app purchase, make sure to double check the receipt info before assuming the player has purchased it properly. Now that the game has all the Google Play services set up, it was time to make the store page. I started by making screenshots of the game. I went through many brainstorming sessions and came up with 5 key bullet points to show a potential customer. The first and most important screenshot is explaining the central game mechanics, turn-based combat, and roguelike elements. With this first screenshot, I decided early on that each screenshot should have a different colored theme to help them stand out individually. If they were just black and white, I felt that they would blend together too much at a distance. My second screenshot showed the variety of enemies in the game, and helped depict the major themes of the game with its zombies. Then to drive home the point that the game is randomly generated, I made another screenshot showing a single level drawn in multiple styles. Since the most important screenshots are the first 3, I decided the last 2 would just be extra if the customer decided to look into my game further. The 4th screenshot demonstrates that you can unlock more characters in the game. And finally, the last screenshot drives home the point of survival horror, since a core mechanic of the game is conservation of resources. The last thing I needed to do was make a description. After some light research, I found that in order to actually read the game's description on Google Play, the customer has to click through several screens before they see it. Therefore, I didn't need to worry too much about my description being very good, since most people will never read it. Now that the store page is complete, I needed to work on submitting the game for review. I heard horror stories about Google being very slow to review apps, but in my experience, the longest wait time was 2 days. I got rejected on my first attempt because, as it turns out, if your project utilizes Unity ads, you need to fill out the data safety form according to Unity's website. If you don't, you'll be rejected. I wish this was more obvious, or that Unity developers would get a disclaimer when they import the ads package into their project, but now I know, so don't make this mistake. I've included the link in the description below if you are using Unity ads in your project and you need to fill this form out. And with all of that done, the last thing I needed to do was edit the trailer and this devlog. It's been a long journey and I'm so happy to have finished this project. Now let's head over to the conclusion. Alright, so here we are, the game's out. I went over my deadline of 3 months by like 20 days or so. However, I felt that all that extra time I spent on the game was definitely worth it. It is very hard to put your pencil down, but I'm at a very good spot with the game. Whether it was integrating more classes, achievements, leaderboards, better art, every extra piece of work helped polish the game to a professional standard. This project had a steep learning curve for me, mostly because I had never finished a project from prototype to release before. I'd always ended up getting stuck in the middle, where I could never quite take that next step to making the game a full product. And I never ended up getting to the point where I needed to save the game or market it, integrating APIs, stuff like that. I'm very happy with the results and I can't wait for you to try it out and let me know what you think. 1-Bit Survivor is currently available on the Google Play Store for free, and you can also try it out for free on itch.io, where I have an experimental Windows build for people who don't own an Android device. Thanks for sticking with me throughout this documentary, and I hope you learned something too. For the future, I might make updates on this project and more videos on it, or I might move on to a new project. Who knows where I go, but for now I need to take a break. I'll also be at the upcoming Game Developers Conference. If you would like to meet up with me in person, just let me know. I also updated my Discord channel in case anyone wants to connect. I've linked that in the description as well. With that, I hope you have a great day. Play the game, let me know how it is, and keep making games.